What's up? It's Dominic, and I have to do a language arts project about modern connections to Romeo and Juliet. Now, the scene I have chosen is the fight scene from Romeo and Juliet, which was between Romeo and Mercutio, and the theme of the scene I've chosen is conflict. Now, the modern day connection I've chosen to do a movie, so I'm going to be comparing a movie to a movie, Romeo and Juliet movie to another movie, and the movie I've chosen to compare Romeo and Juliet to, I feel like it best represents Romeo and Juliet because both movies use swords and they fight with swords. So without further ado, the movie I have chosen is Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm going to be using the fight scene Will Turner and Jack Sparrow from the first movie. They're in a little house fighting with swords. And the connection right here is that all four people are fighting with swords, and they both kind of have the same fighting style with the swords. Now, Pirates of the Caribbean is the biggest connection I could come up with the fight scene, just because the fact with the swords and all that stuff. Now, there are a lot of differences. Of course, you have the languages they use. I mean, it's not different languages, but Romeo and Juliet, here's a picture of Romeo and Juliet where Romeo stabbed Mercutio and killed Mercutio. But as I was saying, Romeo and Juliet was written by William Shakespeare, and William Shakespeare uses a lot of different language styles. So you have a lot of vowels, you have a lot of arts, and just different styles of the language. And of course, you're gonna have differences there, just because this movie was made a whole lot sooner than Romeo and Juliet, so they use a lot of newer terms than thou and art. So that's the difference right there. So figurative language, basically these are fight scenes, so you expect figurative language. In the Romeo and Juliet scene, of course, there's a lot of figurative language. In the Pirates of the Caribbean scene, there's a lot of figurative language. They use a lot of figurative language just because they really hate each other, and they want to get inside their opponent's mind. Now, here's a picture of Romeo and Mercutio again. And the mood and tone of both these examples are, of course, their conflicts. They're fighting, both these people really hate each other. Now, Jack Sparrow and Will Turner, they just fought, then they became, buddies. But at that time, they both really hated each other, and Romeo and Mercutio really hated each other. So that is the mood. They were really angry at each other, and they wanted to fight each other. Now, what I'm going to get into now is basically kind of like some differences in the swords. Now, if you've noticed that there's some differences in the swords they have been fighting with, this is another difference that I saw, and I think that is pretty cool. So this is another difference. Now, what you're going to see, this right here is a picture of Romeo and Juliet's, the swords that they use. In the next clip, you're going to see a picture of the Pirates of the Caribbean swords. Make sure you look at the handle, because the handles are like different, really different. As you can tell, this sword's really narrow. Make sure you look at the other sword, and the other sword is coming up right now. Now, of course, you can see the handle. It's got like a little cover over it, and the blade is a whole lot thicker. This is another difference. It definitely looks a whole lot more modern. Of course, the movies were made in totally separate eras. So, of course, it would look modern than a Romeo and Juliet sword. This is not a play, just saying. Romeo and Juliet is a play. So I have said the similarities and differences between Romeo and Juliet and, of course, Pirates of the Caribbean. So, again, the modern connections was Romeo and Juliet compared to Pirates of the Caribbean. I thank you for watching this video. Again, the differences were the language styles, the fighting styles. The similarities were they all use swords in their fighting styles, and the setting was different. So I thank you. Of course, another difference, as I forgot to mention, is that the architecture in both videos are very different. Romeo and Juliet's very different. Old Time and Pirates of the Caribbean are very different. Thank you guys for watching. Miss Barry, if you're watching this, please give me a good grade.